So I'll start back at Michigan Avenue was sort of the what we call phase one of the Chicago Riverwalk, and it kind of went from there westward to State Street. The project was sort of commissioned under CDOT, the Department of Transportation. It had a whole bunch of local and also federal government partnership. It actually required an act of Congress to build into the Chicago River and narrow the waterway. So there's a very lengthy and complicated sort of approval process for that with the Army Corps of Engineers and the Coast Guard and a sort of hydrology study. But eventually we kicked off the design, and that first phase was completed in 2005, and then I think 2009 was another component of it. One of those early parts, and I think we'll walk that way later on, was Wabash Plaza, which is what we call the sort of terraced portion that goes up to connect at Wabash Avenue, and it includes a Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And one of the things that we saw that before we embarked on this sort of more cohesive portion that we call phases 2 and 3, which go from State Street westward to the confluence or the turning basin where the river branches. So for that earlier part, we kind of saw that, just having a continuous path that went around each of the bridge houses for the Chicago's famous movable bridges, of course, which have a lot of sort of subgrade or below street level infrastructure for like the huge pinion system for the vestibule. Just providing a path that allowed you to continue around each of those large bridge houses that butt into the river, kind of turned this into a sort of linear riverside park. It kind of made it something, no matter what we did with the rest of it, as long as we provided that, it would be a huge new amenity. The relationship of Chicagoans and visitors to the rivers changed very much since 30 or more years ago. So that was one big thing that kind of made it an easy win, was to just continue that strategy. The other thing is we had a much more sort of regular space within to work as we go west of State Street. You used to just have a dock level that went from bridge house to bridge house and had stairs at either end that went up to the sidewalk. So the idea was to try and bring that dock level, which is about 7 feet above the average level of the river, bring it closer, get people a little closer to the water. And then our negotiation with Congress gave us 25 feet from the existing dock edge to build out into the water. And then we had 20 feet from the front face of each bridge house to build out. So that gave us our sort of envelope within which to work. It gets wonky at Wabash in Michigan, Columbus, because they kind of move around. The river bends a little bit through there. But it's very regular marching westward here. So we kind of had 6 blocks, or what we call rooms, to kind of work with cohesively. We kind of broke it up. This was sort of the master planning overall design. We partnered with Sasaki Associates out of Boston, who is a more urban planning landscape firm. So we're kind of co-leading this 6-block project. Phase 2 from State Street here to the west side of this room at LaSalle Street was completed in 2015. Chris and I both started at Ross Barney in 2011, and this was the first project that I was working on there, and I was lucky to be able to see it from concept, working at these master plan ideas, and then I was out here almost every day during construction in 2015, and then the next 3 blocks were completed in 2016. Just I'll go into a little bit of the technical stuff since we're talking concrete. We had a bunch of consultants, civil, structural. The general way that at least these 6 rungs were built out was we went out sort of the limit, 25 feet off. We drove sheep piles into the muck, dewatered everything behind it, which will always be saturated. I mean, sheep piles, a huge concrete cap. This is all happening under all the surfaces that we see and that we interact with. Then they had these massive tieback rods that went back to the old dock piles, which are actually wooden piles, you know, from 100 years ago, probably around the time Wacker Drive was constructed. I forget, maybe it was in 1913, something like this. So it basically encapsulated in what's called a dead man. It's like a gigantic concrete linear block that the tiebacks are pinned into. It encapsulates the old dock. It ties to the sheep piles at the edge of the new edge of the water. Then a structural slab goes over the top. Underneath that is just a bunch of gravel fill that'll just remain saturated. So just in the simplest way, that's sort of the basis upon which we could build up whatever we decided we needed to do. What we call the under bridges are where the walkways continue around each bridge house. Those were constructed as a kind of a precast long bathtub, essentially. They're brought out on floating barges. So there are, maybe 4 or 5 floating barges, and they brought them on. There's a series of drilled, what they call drilled shafts, but essentially it's like a 5-foot diameter caisson. When they were building this, they opened up the Basque Bridge. There are a couple they couldn't open as much as they wanted, and they were able to kind of manually override and crank it just a little bit more to get those huge drilled shafts down. What is it, 70 feet below the muck?
Yes.
Yeah. So they had those sort of platforms. They floated in the giant bathtubs, dropped them on, tied all the rebar, and then poured the sort of cavity of the bathtub. In terms of what we decided to put on top of those platforms, the structure of this thing, we kind of, in master planning, thought of it, we were looking at kind of water's edge typologies, and we had a kind of idea of, like a jetty and a marina and the fishing piers, and you'll see some of that stuff maybe expressed a little bit more on some of those newer rooms. But that was a general idea. There was the city had commissioned a study, an economic report about the viability of having businesses down on this river level. Even before our construction started, there were a couple of bars that maybe had a sort of short-lived model in what we call the arcade space, which is sort of where the sidewalk of Upper Wacker Drive overhangs the dock level. So there's I think it's maybe 12 feet wide or something, and there's a little bit of space you can work in. This economic report said that it was not a viable model, and the city basically charged us with that information to make this like a linear park. They did a sort of, it went over to 2FM, which is Fleet Facility Management, which used to be General Services, but they became, after CETA completed this, they became the sort of custodian. They did when it was handed over, they did a sort of test lease with a couple businesses to see if maybe it would work, and it became a huge success beyond anyone's imagination, and now we have a winery and super yachts docking and other grotesquities that we didn't anticipate necessarily. But at its core, it's still a linear park. There are public restrooms that are integrated into the arcade, which is a huge and unusual thing for the public to have here. People assume it's for the restaurants, but it's totally public, and whoever wants can use it anytime. We've got changing rooms and things where the water fountain is, so kids and families can, change their clothes and go into it. So, what it's meant and what it sort of turned into is transformed a little bit, even, after that first more recent phase was completed. But at its core, it's a continual linear park. I'm disrupting it now, but one important thing is that we have an accessible connection between Wacker Drive and street level, and then the river level. There's about a 20-foot grade difference, which makes it very hard to have essentially a ramp. If we had, I talked about elevators, but then that's a maintenance thing. So the idea was to have every couple blocks have an accessible point of access so that anyone can come down here. There's a long ramp at Wabash Plaza, and then at the very end, what we kind of call room 6 is sort of like the leftover ran out of money strategy. There's just a simple concrete ramp.
I don't think we're supposed to say that.
Yeah, the zigzags up there. But this room we're very proud of because it really became about sort of making it not just a sort of accessible alternative path that people can use, but it's sort of all part of a kind of connected geometry. We have a blog post on our website. You could probably search and find it, but we talk a lot about the structure and then some of the details about how the geometry comes together. It's kind of called a stramp, which is kind of a fun name, but it's a little bit of a misnomer because it's a stair ramp. But we work closely with the mayor's office for people with disabilities, MOPD. If you've done permitting on a project here, you've probably had to work with them. But we worked closely with them from the beginning. This is adamantly not a ramp.
It's a sloped surface.
Yeah, it's a sloped walkway, sloped surface. The grade is under 5%. There's sort of a rigorous geometry to it to kind of blend the steps, but basically on a 12-foot module, you get a 7-inch stair riser, and the slope kind of follows that and jogs with it as it hits each step. So it's about 4.8% slope, which means you don't need continuous handrails. It means it's actually quite a lot gentler than a lot of places where you wouldn't even notice the grade. Like most of the approaches of the sidewalk going to the bridges exceed that, are technically out of compliance, but of course it's
existing
established
conditions
already. So that was an important thing to. We call it the River Theater because we had kind of pictured, it as a sort of quiet place where we saw everybody sitting at lunchtime on at the Memorial Plaza. We wanted to do something sort of similar and more river-facing here, and then also integrate that connectivity. This is also the site of the Eastland disaster, and we were happily able to open up this space about a month before the 100th anniversary. It was 1915, a picnic excursion ship that was supposed to go out, I think, to the shores of Indiana for workers of the Western Telegraph Wire Company, something like this. And it capsized. I guess there were a number of issues with the ship. It capsized in the river right here, and I think it was 840 something people drowned in the river right here. It was a huge disaster. We were thinking of integrating some kind of memorial, but it wasn't something we were able to coordinate. But it sort of has a reflective sort of nature to it naturally, which is I think something important. They had a huge memorial after it opened, and the steps were filled with people who, including a lot of ancestors of some of the people who died in the disaster. So it sort of serves as a reflecting space, impromptu event space, a lunch space. It's something that we're happy with how it's come out and how we see it used in even ways we didn't really imagine, like a lot of wedding photographs, and it showed up in an ad I saw for a new...
They're doing photographs over there right now. I don't know for what. But
yeah, there's some new bubbly water with fake sugar ad I saw in there, filming it out here, and so it shows up in things, which is an exciting thing as an architect to witness. The honey locust trees are something thank God they're still doing well after all this time, and we work with landscape consultant was Terry Ryan from Jacobs Ryan. She's very protective about plants and making sure and advocating for them to have what they need. And what they needed here was basically a continuous, so the way that they're in rows, they have a continuous soil, kind of, again, like a concrete bathtub filled with soil. So they have kind of linear connectivity. It's not just like a pit that each one sits in. And then we also have a rainwater harvesting system. So there's some like linear slot drains you'll see at the bottom landings. And it goes back to a water recycling system. There's a 2,000 gallon cistern under the steps here, and it pumps stuff out and irrigates these trees. Yeah, I'll just go on a little bit more about this room. We could talk more about some of the other spaces, but the way it was constructed, and that we've got some photos on the website. You could see if you're interested, but there's nothing very, innovative about it except maybe the scale. It's like many other concrete or stone steps you would see. Essentially a sloped concrete slab. It's waterproofed, and then they dowel in the steps. In this case, they're more monumental. They're all precast, not cast stone, but like a higher, more durable standard to need the architectural level precast. So they're each block. We have these monumental ones, which are sort of a double time on the standard tread. So instead of 7 by 11, 14 by 22. If you pulled one out like a Lego, you'd see it has a sloped bottom that matches the slope of the slab. So it's sort of doweled and grouted into the sloped slab. And they just craned them from street level and just dropped them all in over the course of a few days.
And Mordecai figured out all this geometry. We have some, I think they're on the website.
SketchUp.
Yeah.
Old technology, but we got it to work.
Yeah.
And we had very detailed drawings. A civil engineer, structural engineer, everybody got on board and had this puzzle in their minds. And we had detailed drawings, showed the grade of every level, and made it happen. So one thing that was added, it was important to us, sort of conceptually, to have this like a sidewalk that kind of folds down to the river and gets as close as we can. They've since added, we had these bollards that are sort of, Wacker Drive, sort of City Beautiful, nods type of thing, and they've got little lights in them. They added barriers between each of those bollards. They also added, right before they opened, these sort of little guards, these open guards. There's just sort of a hand grip, but it just makes it feel a little less precipitous, which is fine. It's not terribly obstructive. Another question we get a lot is about the water's edge and like why there isn't a fence or a barrier. There's no requirement to have one. Of course, we want people to feel comfortable, so we have a few different strategies. When we get closest to the water, at the under bridges and a sort of a narrow path, there's also active, I forget, alternative transportation funding that require that we have it's technically a bike path. There's been a sort of struggle back and forth with whether they can be prohibited by management or how it relates retroactively with the funding. But at the beginning, it was sort of, there's an allowance for them built into the funding of this. That's another reason for wanting guardrails where we narrow and go around the bridge houses here. You can also think about the lakeshore path and how there's no barrier that isolates people from the water's edge. Really, the sort of charge was to make people feel as connected as they can and also safe. When we go east, you'll see some other strategies. So there's sort of an upper path and then a lower path that's more conducive to some of the kayaks and loading from boats, or now we have people jumping in and swimming, so whatever, you could get even closer there. People fishing. So that was another part of our strategy. It took a lot of, I guess, talking CDOT off the ledge about whether it's okay to do these things, but in the end, with some compromises built in, I think we were able to do a pretty good job of it.
Yeah. I think the first phase at the Memorial Plaza, you can see that you're raised up quite a bit from the water. So in the second and third phase, we wanted to try to bring you closer to the water, and that was one of the goals of the project, is to be able to bring you closer to the water. And I think on each of the phases, we've learned and improved on the next set of rooms.
Yeah, good. Are there, I don't know if do we want to walk and see some of the other spaces and talk about some of these things? We could do that. Yeah. Are there any questions about this room specifically or other background stuff? Yes.
Hi. Was there consideration made on what the view is from the theater, or where you put certain things because of the?
Yeah, I mean it's a, like, the context can't be beat, right? And like the across from Marina City was a room that we kind of called the Marina Plaza, and it kind of carried that idea of having docks because of the the base of Marina City with the docks there, and then across from it we have provisions and tie-ups for boats and things, and yeah, that's like the most explicit one, but yeah, just the having this be kind of a place to reflect and experience the city, and for free and public and continuously, so it's been part of it.
How about winter? Did you give any special thought to winter?
Yeah, that's a big thing, and I think a lot of it is maintenance, but how to make this like a year-round space. Spring and fall are easier. We have like a lot of the planting choices. We're done with consideration of how they look in the shoulder seasons. The like Marina Plaza area has a bunch of red maples that all sort of coordinate in brilliant red, and here we have the honey locust that turn golden, but they have done a pretty good job of maintaining at least a path that's plowed out or shoveled for year-round use.
And some of the vendors have been inventive. At City Winery for a while, they had little like clear huts that were heated. I don't know if that was in the dead of winter, but it was in early spring before it got warm. They were using those,
right.
And I think those were pretty successful. It kind of depends on what the city and what the vendors are open to for maintaining.
But minimally, it reverts to being a continuous linear path that people can use.
And it is used a lot by walkers, runners, people coming from the train to River North is a big connector there. And you do see a lot of people sitting like we envisioned on the River Theater, having lunch and hanging out with friends. And it is, I feel like, a very successful space. It's fun to see because our office is just a few blocks away, so we're by here all the time, so it's very exciting to see how it's being used.
Not a question, but I have a couple friends who they got engaged right here.
Oh, great!
To her on the steps, and then they had their wedding reception in the River Roast.
Oh, neat! Yeah, the River Roast has a great view from this. Yeah.
We kind of collect stories like that, so it's like even it's just.
You're going to be on the next tour. We'll be talking about that.
Yeah. Long term, what kind of maintenance is required for this type of infrastructure?
That's a good question. There's some stuff like some of the lighting. At the time we designed it, it was what's called IP68, which is basically a submersible like fountain type fixtures. So there's a datum up to which is like the maximum flood zone before they open the docks. When there's a huge storm event, we get the combined sewerage into the river, unfortunately. It goes up to a certain level, and then they'll open the docks and it'll outlet into the lake. But before they open stuff up, they let it get to a certain level. So everything under that level is basically submersible. So all the fixtures are rated for that. I can't say they've held up like we had expected or hoped them to, so there eventually will be lighting improvements. There's also LED technologies improving still, and when we designed it 14 years ago wasn't as good as it is now. So some of that stuff will have to get changed out. But everything is made to just be able to be power washed, and I'm sure sealants will need to get replaced at some point. But everything below that level is stainless steel, marine grade 316 concrete. We got the structural slab, so we don't have to worry about settling.
We have had to reset some pavers here and there.
Some pavers, especially on we used like a thinner plank type one that we were assured would work just as well on some of those other rooms, and they haven't held up as well. So there's some pavers that'll have to get replaced out.
Concrete that's submerged. Is there kind of a thought to the lifespan of that too, or is there?
No, I mean it is finite, I suppose, but there's sort of the marine edge and the structural slab and the structure of everything. The things on top of it, could essentially be switched out. Some of that infrastructural concrete, I guess, eventually is protected in various ways with waterproofing and other things on top of it. But yeah, ultimately it would probably require some repair, just given the seasonal cycles. But it might be looking 100 years or so out. So yeah, I think just the nature of it, you kind of have a platform and then stuff on top of it that could be eventually.
Was concrete always going to be the only choice, or did you consider boardwalk or anything?
Yeah, we did. There was a lot of sort of conceptual options. There were some early renderings and some studies that SOM and some other firms had done over the last 20 years or so that showed something that looked more like kind of a dock edge. Ultimately, kind of understanding the life cycle and maintenance that could be expected out here, we just sort of went all in with the most durable stuff we could, instead of there's some limited like stone, granite, and you'll see it more in the other rooms. So the palette is really stone, precast stainless steel. Stainless steel for there's a kind of grading platform that connects the underbridge walkways to the sort of main land. It's open grading, but it's a very tight spacing, and it has like kind of non-grip or a grip surface.
Slip knot.
Is it slip knot or all grip, or I forget which one of those things. So when the light's right, you can look down and sort of, you're kind of walking over the water, you can see it. And another improvement, I'm just going on a tangent, thanks. Behind each underbridge has a stainless steel canopy to keep walkers protected from all the crap that falls through the bridges when bus goes over, whatever, slush and such. On the older underbridges, Michigan Avenue, Wabash, it's sort of connected to the bridge house. The way it was constructed, we were able to push it off, so there's water that kind of goes all the way. It's like each of these underbridge pathways is sort of an island with water continuously around it. So that was another sort of experiential thing that, we have this polished stainless steel above you, reflecting the water, and on all sides there's the water as well. So that's another thing we wanted to express. Yes?
Is there any chance to duplicate this on the north?
Yeah, that's a great question. That, as well as like once a river bends and goes southward, is another place where we would love that kind of connectivity. It's sort of built into how the project came about, because essentially we're in the right-of-way that CDOT holds because of Wacker Drive and Lower Wacker Drive. So it's sort of like the front yard of Wacker Drive, which meant that we have like a kind of cohesive ownership of it, which is the Department of Transportation. The North Bank is all private and under the direction of each of those individual property owners. The same thing happens when Wacker Drive bends and goes southward around the corner here. It kind of moves inward, and then you have private property holders that are between Wacker Drive and the river there. So it means there can't be a cohesive sort of plan to connect those. I mean, it would have to be some kind of cooperative agreement between each of those owners. But that's sort of the unique ownership that fostered this project to kind of be allowed to happen.
Wouldn't a walk be in the river, which is like federal?
Oh, in the river itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there have been some studies about, more as like a floating or temporary thing. I don't know. I guess they could do a similar study, federal backed kind of study.
The city does have a website and has studied access points to the river all along the rivers, and that's being used when people are studying because there's other places that they would love to add river walks in neighborhoods and other places along the river, so it's not just in the downtown area. So the city has put together kind of a study and a report on the access points, because there's a lot of coordination that has to be done with the owners of the properties. But it is something that I think everybody would like to have more of these amenities around the city, and they are actively looking at helping people who want to develop the area with there's a lot of red tape and restrictions in these access points, trying to figure out all the things that you have to do to build on the river. So they are helping people. It's a very slow process.
Yeah.
So your rooms wouldn't be the same, because that would be the private building.
Yeah.
It would be up to them to access.
Yeah.
Right, and I think there are some points.
Great asset for any of these buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And these 3 towers all came after the Riverwalk was completed. So I mean, it's been a huge boon to private landholders. But and many of them have sort of Riverwalk amenities, as they say. I don't think anyone gets as close. But there's some stuff farther up north, where behind the REI Whole Foods area, where there's a sort of cohesive project, the Wild Mile project. So it's generated a lot of that kind of interest, but I think the cohesiveness of one big project is a pretty rare feat that they were able to do here.
Has anybody looked at the economic benefit, or what's accrued economically as a result?
As a result of the build out of this?
Yeah.
I don't know of a comprehensive study, but I mean, anecdotally, it's certainly become something that pops up on tourism things. The boat tours, of course, have always been so popular. It's like another thing with that.
And I have heard, I don't know how true it is, that City Winery, who's has a space on the Riverwalk, that their revenue from the Riverwalk, which is only open so many months a year, is higher than at their location over in the west.
Right.
So
Finish that?
it's higher than their permanent location over in West Loop.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can walk eastward, and anytime you like, I'd encourage you to check out the stuff west. We won't look at it now, but I'm happy if Stewart, you share our emails. If people have follow-up questions, we're always happy to.
Yeah, we can talk about a few
Yeah.
spaces along.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of those and get you on the way to your next project. Yeah, sorry. We're taking...
About 10 years ago, right?
10 years ago.
I'll just talk briefly about this space, and then we'll go on to the next one, the marina. This is what we call the Cove. It's where you see this concept that's carried through most of the other spaces about having an arcade. It was just sort of a TBD amenity space. Now it's become a big. We've had the. I think the only things that we kind of planned for was to have the it's got folded glass partitions. It's got a barrier up that isolates the Riverwalk from Lower Wacker Drive acoustically and physically, and it's got some public restrooms. The sort of concept for this block was to foster kayaks and human-powered craft to get really close to the water. I think this is as low as we ever are able to get. And then we continue the path above so that there's kind of a buffer zone, so ostensibly prevent people from dropping in by accident. you can, when you look at the stairs at every one of these blocks, you'll see sort of where we added to it. I think oftentimes, like in this one, you'll have the concrete original steps, and then there's some granite ones that are where we've added to you can kind of trace where we've gotten lower and lower towards the water.
A lot of what you see here too has been added on by the tenants that operate the businesses along here. The flower pots and a lot of the build outs around the arcade are all done by the tenants to provide more space for seating and tables.
Yeah, everything beyond that arcade was public. There are tables and things. There's some kind of a nefarious agreement, but it's a public way, like you would have a sidewalk cafe or whatever. So just remember the restrooms are public.
Yeah.
They're free for you to use. Yeah.
Yeah, I think where the plants are was all supposed to be seating, and now the plants are taking over.
Are these for the skateboarders? Or?
Yeah, it was I don't know if it was a late provision, but became something.
Mandate from the city.
Yeah. It's less obtrusive than it could be, but yeah.
You know, any skateboarders in the river, that's for sure.
Yeah. It could have been a total skate park without it, I suppose.
Is it 24 hours?
No, they do close it off sometimes. That's why they put the railings up along the river, and they have some gates at some of the stairs. They like to have the ability to close it down when they want to, but I don't know if they do it every day. But they do close it off at times. Head to the next one.
If there are any specific questions about this space, otherwise we could go on to the next one, so keep you on schedule. All right, we'll talk briefly about this space and then release you to the Harry Weiss Church next up. We didn't bring up the plantings, but that's something Chris reminded me. All those plantings along the water's edge in the cove area, and then similarly on some of the spaces to the east that get a little more planting heavy, are all sort of riparian species. They can be submerged or permanently or temporarily, cyclically. And again, sort of, it's a rare amenity to have a place for a dog to pee or whatever. So it's another thing, as a linear park concept, that was a nice thing to provide, and kind of connect to the origins of the river and sort of restoring it to something much better than the open sewer status of the industrial age. I'm not happy seeing the plastic flowers, but I guess it's imitative. This room is a little bit more sparse on the plantings, except it's got a series of, I think there's some river birch. I don't know if that did well. There's some river birch, and then there's the maple trees that all kind of turn bright red, and then the big planters up along the bridge houses. This is like the Marina Plaza room, as we called it. It's got the docking tie-ups and things. We had imagined, in the future, maybe people being able to bring their boats up here or come downtown and disembark here pretty quickly. Paired with a winery, we got the long 50-foot yacht showing up. And I think they also have some sort of boat rental stuff. But it's cool, and it's a great kind of mirror of what's happening on the other side of the river at Marina City. Anything else to add? Got more restrooms in here.
No, I think City Winery is probably the longest, tenant here, and they have made a lot of improvements. It is a very successful location for them.
Yeah, this is not original.
No. And those docks over there are not original.
Oh, yeah.
They added things.
Yeah. But that's
the attitude between the city and private tenants. Has that really been a partnership? And you talked about the role of the private investment in the spaces over there. Has that been contentious, or?
It's not something we've really been privy to much, except that it wasn't when we designed it, it wasn't as a revenue generator. It was as a park space.
Right.
I'm sure 2FM has benefited greatly from this, and I think they had a sort of experimental like lease period initially, and now I think it's becoming something that they can depend on more as a generator, which is a good thing. Is it'll probably always then just be a push and pull between it serving as a public thing and as a generator thing, and the sort of partnership. So
Those seem in conflict sometimes.
they do often, but it just remember, I guess it's the original charge is important to us, so that's what we continue to sort of advocate and remind people of. Yeah. Well, we've talked for a while. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we're happy with you sharing our emails, or you can find us on our website probably too, and I'm always happy to talk at length about the project and answer any specific questions, technical items, whatever.
And if anybody else wants to build along the river, just give us a call. We're happy to do another one.
Yeah.